Hello and welcome to a new year and a new series of the Tech Lab. We are back after a holiday hiatus with episode 5. On this episode, I'm joined by Alex Fedorov. He is the head of engineering at Ride Capital. Alex is an award-winning coder and a distinguished software engineer with over 15 years of experience. We're going to go into his journey, childhood, how he became interested in tech, and also how he joined Ride Capital and the lessons that he's learned along the way. Ride's long-term vision is actually to become a modern digital private investment bank that targets the next generation of investors who might not actually have that access to higher investment or trade. In general, at Source Talks, our mission is simple: to provide value by allowing you to hear from tech leaders in this more intimate setting and to discuss these key challenges and trends in the market at the moment. And ultimately, we're aiming to deliver content that everyone can learn from and offer you practical insights that you can apply to your own business context. Let's get into it. Good afternoon, Alex. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, guys. I'm doing good. How are you?
Very good, very good. So, yeah, very keen to jump into the discussion. Could you tell us a bit more about your role and what was it about Ride that made you join?
Yes, so my role at Ride is head of engineering, and I'm responsible for the technology. And I started at Ride very early when there was only founders and a couple of freelancers. So I was basically the first full-time employee, and I've helped them build engineering discipline from scratch. What made me join Ride is my interest in finance and entrepreneurship.
Amazing.
I've joined because the founders, Felix and Christine, were amazing experts in that field. For example, Christine was an expert in stock market and capital markets investments and trading, and Felix is expert in real estate market investments. And I've been very curious and wanted to learn much more and deeper about these topics. So for me, it was a great fit. And I have learned over these 4 years that I've been at Ride a lot from them.
Nice. And what are some of the biggest challenges you guys are facing right now?
The biggest challenges that I personally face is that we had a streak of a few critical projects going after one after another. And that puts some things in a disruption in the company and how it operates. We're trying to put it all, making sure that it all stays under control and that we can, keep successfully operating, despite having these critical projects sometimes. Another challenge that I also have encountered already multiple times, and I still am iterating over the possible solution for this, it's when you need to bootstrap a new discipline. For example, when you don't have any product management, how do you get the first one, and how do you make sure that they're productive, and then that discipline can grow and scale into multiple product managers and so on. And it can also interact well with development teams and so on, and also be integrated into development teams. The same challenge I have with, for example, business analysts or data as well. It's very difficult to bootstrap these disciplines from scratch.
And speaking about these challenges as well, like what would the future look like, you think, for Ride when you talk about business architecture and data? Obviously can take years and years to implement. What sort of some of the plans, if you can share those for our listeners?
I think the challenge of Ride would be to optimize and improve its internal operations so that as much as possible will be automated. And the reason for this is because our approach has so far been very, very lean approach to implementation of the software. So we only do absolutely the things that are necessary and bring the most business value to the business and to our customers. So we always try to do it in such a way that we have as least potential waste as possible. Therefore, we always look at things from the lens of, does this need to be done now, or can this be done later? And then we, of course, postpone things that can be done later. However, this is sort of a type of a leverage or type of debt, depends how you want to look at it, because then your business operations become leveraged on this very lean implementations, and they work. Under normal circumstances, they work very well. But when there's Murphy and Murphy hits you in some way or form, for example, like we had recently a couple of critical projects, it creates massive amounts of work, and suddenly things that you wanted to postpone to later need to be implemented yesterday, and not one of them. So you can implement one, be done with it, but at once multitude of things. So my learning, for example, from that is that you need to at least be prepared for this, even if you're going to do it. If you're going to go very, 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 very lean, you need to know that this is a risk involved, and you need to know or understand what it means and what will happen when Murphy hits.
Nice. And talking about this preparation and some of the other values, what else have you learned from your time so far, the 4 years at Ride?
One of the most important learnings for me personally from working at Ride myself, but also observing our founders, Felix and Christine, is that gut feeling and intuition are very important and should not be simply discarded as something wishy-washy. For example, when I have a situation where the current facts on the table and the logic tells me I should do this, but my gut feeling and intuition tells me probably not, it's better to do this. Almost every time that I have not listened to my intuition and went with what was logical, I realized later it was a mistake, and an obvious one, and that I should have listened to my intuition. However, I do know that only listening to gut feeling is also not a good idea, because it can lead you astray, it can cause biases and create other types of problems. So what I learned is that whenever there is this gut feeling, a conflict between what you see on a table in terms of facts and logic and your gut feeling are in conflict, I learned that I need to analyze my gut feeling much deeper and verbalize it also into rational and logic, so I can understand why exactly I feel that this is a better direction. And then once I verbalized it, then I can finally compare and make a proper decision. However, it's a meticulous work. It takes time. If you have a case in front of you, it might take several hours to analyze this.
So intuition first over logic, but then also not only just listening to your gut feelings, really taking in the whole picture.
I wouldn't say intuition first. I would say that do not discard intuition and gut feeling, especially if it's conflicting with what you think needs to be done logically. But instead use it to its full extent to get more information and make a better decision, combining what you see on the table and what was the result of your intuition, of thinking about your intuition deeply.
I'm really keen to get into the main part of this discussion and just discuss yourself, Alex, and your journey and how you became in the head of engineering at this exciting company. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey really into the tech industry, where sort of software captured your heart at a young age and to where you are today?
Yes, I can definitely talk about that. I'll try to be brief. So when I was very young, 8 years old, well, in fact, when I was 4 years old, I already had a computer, a very old one. And because my father was a programmer at the bank, in fact, and he brought a very old computer and built it up and gave me so that I can play 1 hour a day or something. But because it was very old, it had only 5 games and had very old text-based system. I think it was DOS or something like this. By the time that I was 8 years old, I got tired of all these 5 games, and there was no variety, so I didn't have anything more. And I asked my father, well, I want to build a game of my own because I have some ideas how to do this. Can you bring me a book about programming? So he did. And at that point, I did open the book. I read 1 chapter and I closed it because it was too difficult to understand, too overwhelming. So at this point, you could say I didn't start coding. I only have shown an interest. However, when I was 9 years old, I felt ready again. So I opened it again and started reading and started actually trying it. And eventually I got to the point, with my father's help, of course, where my first program was running and I started experimenting and playing around with it. Then in school, what happened is that I had an interesting story where I was a diligent student in school. However, there was this one time when with my friends, I decided for the first time to skip a class. And that led to skipping a couple more days because we thought that, if we skip until Friday, then by Monday they will forget. Very interesting logic, isn't it? Yeah, of course, that doesn't work that way. However, our homeroom teacher was a very, very, very good person. So what she did, she asked me like, "Oh, so what did you do when you skipped the classes?" I said, "Oh, we went with friends and played computer games in the computer club, these network games." And she asked, "So are you interested in computers?" Like, "Yeah, I am. Like, I have this thing. I like sometimes I code on Turbo Pascal at home for my free time." She said me, "Oh, well, don't you think that it would be a good idea to visit like a couple times informatics class, just as a visitor to listen?" I was like, "Okay, let's do it." So she found something I was interested in and like kind of hooked me to channel my energy of wanting to do something, which was probably not channeled correctly. Therefore, why I was about to turn the link, so to speak. So she rechanneled that into me going to informatics class, and then I went there, and there were these upperclassmen who were all doing something, whatever. I think studying Word or Excel, something like this at the moment. And I just listened, and I was just fiddling with computer. I found that they did have Turbo Pascal and stuff, so I started doing stuff. And then the teacher came along after the class and asked like, "Oh, so what are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I just write some programs." And she was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And she gave me a couple of tasks to implement, and I implemented them with difficulty. And then she realized that I can actually solve problems that are not that simple. So she decided to send me to the Informatics Olympiad as soon as I am eligible, because I wasn't eligible yet. I was too young to even go. So I had to wait for 2 years before I go. And the problem was that I moved school, so I kind of lost this connection or this opportunity to go. So I was also where I wanted to be late, but then I got bored again. I remembered again that somebody wanted to send me to Olympia, so I went. And in this new school, I found an informatics teacher. And I said, "Well, in previous school, they wanted to send me to Olympiad. Is that something I can do here?" Basically. Yeah. So I went, and I've got the third place on that city level Olympiad, and then I went to regional level. I got third place as well. And when you get any kind of numbered place, first, second, third on region level, then you have an opportunity to be selected to go to full Ukrainian country level. And for this, there is like an extra selection round where they don't only do the competition, they also teach you. So they teach you in the morning. There is like a lecturer from university, math and informatics lecturer, who teaches you different problems and different solutions to them and approaches. And then in the afternoon, you have the whole 5 hours of competition just focused on these problems. And that repeats 5 times, 5 days. It's like a camp, basically. That camp I didn't go through for the first time. That was when I was in 8th grade. So I learned a lot, but I wasn't selected for the Ukrainian level. But next 3 years, 9th, 10th, and 11th year of school, I was always selected, and I always got a third place at the Ukrainian level.
And how old would you have been then?
So 9, let me count. So 11th grade is 17. So I was 16, 15. So 15, 16, 17 when I was doing that. So that was like already high school, end of school. And then I went to university to continue doing the same thing. Because what do you think they're doing with people who go to this level? So these same professors from these universities then try to recruit you to come and work to study in their faculty, so that they can put you on a not Olympiad team now, but it's called ICM, ICPC. These are international programming competitions that are collegial. Collegial means that they are team-based. So if in school I had to solo, in university I had to work with a team of 3 together.
Okay.
And the cool thing is that I had to work on a single computer, all three. So which means that you have to divide responsibilities. And also there was a lot of pairing. So because one would be, let's say, coding, and another one would be checking that everything looks good and correct and give feedback very rapidly, because it was also in this competition very important to do it very quickly. So this is where I got a taste of teamwork, basically.
Yeah.
In fact, by the end of my university year, I was a captain, and I also have been training new blood, or new joiners, so to speak, the fresh grads, or sorry, freshmen. How would you call that? Freshmen, I guess. Yeah. So the people who were doing this for the first year, essentially. So this was a lot of fun, and that's also gave me some leadership experience as well. It was also difficult, of course. But at the same time, back at these years when I was in university, I also was working full time at the same time for a company, for like a startup in Ukraine. I also had my friend who was also into that. He was also working full time as a software engineer. And we always met, and we kind of always had this like internal competition between us, like how can we, well, of course, in terms of like growing our salary, but also in terms of growing our knowledge, growing our practice. And this is where we would always bring to the table something that, hey, I learned this thing, and I learned this, and we would share essentially, and always try to not stay behind and also learn what others learn as well. So it was like a very healthy competition in that sense. As a result of that, at one point, my friend Max, he brought a practice called test-driven development. He's like, oh, I've read about this, let's try it together. And that practice was probably a complete pivoting point in my career, because that practice have shown me, that actually software development can be very predictable. Like it's not just you make a lot of mistakes and you debug for hours, and then finally you get it done, hopefully, and it's all mostly working. With test-driven development, I realized, this can be very predictable. I can know for sure if it works or not. Well, given if I put enough effort into my tests. So I started researching this and getting into this space, and I went to a conference once where there was a speaker who was talking about code readability and how easy it is to understand. And one key point there that he told me was that it's important to disable your internal compiler in your brain when you read code or when you even write it. Why is that? Well, because when you have internal compiler and you can actually run the code in your head and know what the result would be, then if you are good at it, then you can understand almost any code, no matter how bad it is. But it doesn't mean that everybody on the team will be able to understand it so easily. And I had this trait because this is what we had to be trained throughout my Olympiad years and my competition years. We had to be trained to be able to do this, because that's the only way to survive in these competitions and even attain any kind of high place. But I realized after I listened to this talk, actually it is hurting me professionally, because when I produce code, it makes total sense to me and it's simple from my perspective, but then it's very complex to others, because they can't do that. They haven't been trained for 9 years to do this. So what I did is that I followed his advice to disable this, kind of not do this proactively, and try to write and read the code so that it basically reads like an English prose, that it's easy to understand for maybe even somebody who doesn't know programming. They just can read it and kind of get a clue what it's doing. And then this opened the whole world of me reading the different books how to do this, and then I got into extreme programming. And then I was reading blogs of Pivotal Labs about how to do this, because they were also into extreme programming. They were also about these concepts, about how to make the software better and easier to understand and easier to work with and easier to change. So I was a fan of them. I was still back in Ukraine. And when I was in 2013 considering to move elsewhere, I was considering Germany, UK, Canada, and US to move for my next opportunity, my next job. Fedorov Labs was one of the places. However, it turned out that I spoke with my wife and we decided, we probably don't want to go to US. at the moment. And we settled on Germany, so I found like a job in Germany, and I moved to Berlin in 2014. But I remembered at that time, that Pivotal Labs is a cool place, and really love what they write about, and it was like kind of a fun. However, there were only 3 offices back then of Pivotal Labs, and they were, I think, US, UK, and Canada, which were not an option after my discussion with my wife. So I'm working like one job, another job in Berlin, and suddenly I meet this guy Adam Berlin. It's an interesting surname. Amazing person. We meet at the meetup, and I understand like we're very like-minded. Like it's like whatever I'm trying to achieve, he also is trying to achieve, and we want to get better all the time and get better at software and how to do it better and how to do it faster and so on. And then after the meetup, he follows me on Twitter, and I see in his profile it says that he works at Pivotal. I was like,
Oh, no way.
like, what's he doing here? Is he just visiting? No, but he said that at his office in Berlin. I was like, what's happening? So I checked it out. I looked at, well, first of all, it was 2016, end of 2015, beginning of 2016. So it was like December, January. I don't quite remember exactly what's with Pivotal doing. And I seen, they have now 21 offices around the world, and one of them is in Berlin. Still doesn't have an address on the website. So I have applied the same evening. And shortly thereafter, a couple of months later, I was already starting Pivotal. This was Pivotal. It was like a technology company, but also at its heart it was a consultancy, and I joined the consultancy unit. So this has given me a lot of experience and also business smarts, even though I had to still do a lot of software development, a lot of training for other developers on client side and so on, and some leadership. But it, of course, also as a consultant, I had to learn a lot about business and so on. And this is where I also learned about lean and lean startup and other approaches. So like how to actually be an entrepreneur, how to build a business, especially because Pivotal even at the time had Eric Ries as a in-house entrepreneur, or whatever it's called. Like, so he was writing one of his books, and he was inside of Pivotal because so that he has like case studies and so on from Pivotal. So at this point where I started on the side, a day I'm working my consultancy job, and in the evening or at other times, I was trying to build something. Right? I was trying to build some kind of online business. I was trying to apply these approaches of lean startup, of testing minimum viable experiments and VPs and so on. So I was trying to apply this myself on a smaller scale, right? So on a scale of first of my blog, and also later on I tried to like launch a small ebook and like informational business, because informational business is something you could do alone, bootstrap, not like a big startup thing. And then later on, around 2019, I decided that, I want to try to build something serious. And this is where I quit Pivotal and I started on my own. And for 3 months and a half, I was trying to build rapidly a lot of prototypes and kind of product, technical products, so that I can launch them into market, test them, see if there is any response, and I can start growing them. This was a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. I've launched 3.5 products back then. It was very rapid, and one of them was even had a positive response from the market. There was a lot of signups, at least for the free account. I struggled to convert them to paid account. I mean, as how it works. But the fact that even there was an interest and a lot of very fast growth of the free accounts, at least after launch, made me think, okay, this is a good business. But I struggled to convert the actual users into paid version. And then I spoke to like a business networking to another person who is more experienced in business, and we quickly sort of like analyzed in the conversation that business model, and he said, "Oh, this looks like a B2B model. You should go to big companies and sell the solution." And I was like, "I'm afraid of this." This is where interesting concepts started hitting me. It was fear of failure. So at this point, I was afraid to do something so big because for me, my goal was to build autonomous B2C business where I can bootstrap it and go like full indie hacker on it. But something like a B2B concept was scary in my mind because I've never done this myself. I've seen this being done, and I always know it's a big operation. You need a lot of salespeople, you need a lot of operations, you need everything in it. And I was like not personally ready for that. I was afraid of that. I was afraid to fail.
Yeah.
So that was my first bottleneck in my, kind of like a professional entrepreneurial career, fear of failure. So this fear of failure is interesting because I have managed to overcome it later because I've tried to also build more things, and one of the things that I've built was this Kotlin ebook, and I also tried to build on top of this video courses. So I started with a pilot. And with the pilot, there was an interesting problem, is that I launched the pilot for this course so that I can fail. I expected to fail. So at this point, I felt like, okay, I want to fail. So I was expecting failure, so I was not afraid of failure. So that I can learn, so I can do it better and then iterate until it's working, right? So that was my expectation.
Yeah.
What happened instead is that I have not failed. So I launched it in 72 hours. I got 8 sales. And then I closed the pilot because I wanted, now I want to, okay, I have 8 sales. I want to get feedback from these people. And I was not getting any feedback. The market was silent, no communication back. Nobody told me that it sucks, that it's a bad product or something, but nobody was also telling me that they used it and it was good. Instead of persevering at this point, I got hit by something that I did not understand at the time, but I understood it a couple of years later, which was fear of success. It's where you do something and it sort of works, but you don't have the feedback loop closed. And what I realized later, what I should have done, is that I should have just I should have scaled it further until I hit the wall and get feedback. So that's the problem with this kind of limited amount of success and waiting to hit the wall, is that when you don't hit it, you feel confused. And my learning is that now when this happens, and if I'm in that situation, I just keep going forward until I hit the actual obstacle, and then I can learn from it.
And those bottlenecks are quite similar, right? Like the fear of failure and the fear of success. That's really interesting.
Yes. So, long story short, by the time that I was building these small products that I wanted to launch and was testing them, I've also done some networking in the evening, like business networking, because if you're working on your own for a very long time, you could get lonely. So I was using that opportunity in the evenings to go and meet people. And I've met this one guy that was running a meetup for where they played Cashflow games. Cashflow is a game from that Rich Dad Poor Dad has developed, and its essence is that it's teaching in a very playful manner real basic financial investment knowledge, not like a high level, but basics.
Good.
Right, and what that did to me is that it has blasted through some of my limiting beliefs about finance and investment. For example, I thought that to start investing, you need like 500K minimum. That's what I thought. That's my background. That's where I come from. So that was the belief. I didn't know that I could start with 5K or 2K or something, right? And also additionally, I thought that debt is always bad. That also was like a belief that was rooted in me because of my background, where I come from.
Yeah.
So once I understood that it's not true, that you can start with small amounts, and you also, the debt is not always bad. There is like bad debt and actually there's good debt, depending on situation, depending on what is it used for. Then I realized something. Well, I am burning my own money that I could have invested. And instead I could have been burning somebody else's money if I knew how to raise from others, right? So, and I could have tried more ideas and actually got to success or to a successful idea faster. So I was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And so I decided, well, let's go back to the market. Let's go back, find a job or a consultancy or freelance or something to recover my cash flow, because that's important to have consistent cash flow if you want to be an investor. Then I started looking what's up in the market. And then through a couple of my connections, there are other CTOs that work in Berlin, different startups. I got in touch with Christine and Felix. We had a coffee, and it was a long coffee. It was like 3 hours or something conversation. And when I learned that they're both investors in different expertises, exactly what I'm right now very, very interested in and very curious about and want to learn as much as possible. And they're building the startup where they're trying to, optimize how people design their wealth. It was called wealth design back then, the software that we was building. And they already have some good projects and investment projects underneath, and they looked like solid projects. So I thought, okay, this is already a company that has assets and something that's working, already has some paying customers. So it wasn't like a fluke. It was an actual business. They were solving some real business need. And additionally, when I learned that Felix has 5 cash flow games at home, because he in the past ran his own seminars and training sessions for real estate investing, and he used that game as a vehicle to also blast through these limiting beliefs and assumptions about investing. I was like sold. I basically, okay, next day was Wednesday when I met them. On Thursday in the morning, I was already on the call with Felix negotiating my shares and salary or whatever, the package. And on Monday, I already started. So this was very quick time. So that's how I joined Ride. And it has been absolutely the right choice for me. So I've learned a lot about finance. I learned a lot about investment. In fact, during my journey at Ride, I've learned at Ride, but also learned outside of Ride about this on my own. I basically became a financial engineer. Right now, I don't know a person who knows about options more than I do and understands. So I'm having a lot of fun basically with my free time with options, trading and strategies, etc. And obviously at some point when we can, as Ride, I want to integrate some of that knowledge into our products. But not currently, I don't think we can do this. So this is the story.
Wow. I have a lot of questions. I mean, like, that's really interesting, especially the part about you growing up and well, just to focus on just what you were talking about there. What else, if like let's say you want to be an investor, you said sort of like one of the things is consistent cash flow, and what might be some other advice to if people want to start investing? Because I think people have very similar mindsets, right? They think, oh my God, like I'm just going to get into debt quickly. Debt is bad. I don't have enough initial cash. I maybe have 1 or 2K, but this is not enough. Like, what would be your sort of other advice going forward?
Well, I do think that consistent cash flow is important. So you're able to earn money either through a job or through a freelance or through your own small business or even medium-sized business. That is an important point because that's what you can always rely on. So that's important to have that. Once you have that, then it becomes a resource. So that by cash flow, what I mean actually a difference between what comes in and what usually goes out. Like your expenses, all your taxes, everything, or your debt service if you have any debt, and then you have what's left every month. That's your as a personal cash flow, and that number is sort of like a resource. So you shouldn't let it be negative. You shouldn't let it go down to near zero because then you can't do anything. Basically, when it's like if your cash flow is only €100 per month, then you can't really do anything. It's very difficult to move around. But when your cash flow is, let's say, €900 per month, you can get liquidity from the bank or other liquidity providers that will reduce your cash flow to 700, which still allows you to move around just as much. But now you have an extra liquidity that you can now use. Of course, that assumes that you want to use that liquidity to invest into something that's gonna have positive return, because if you have negative returns, then that would make you lose money over time, and that's not good.
Yeah.
So there's another thing is to learn how to spot good investments, good investment opportunities.
Interesting. And going back, you talk about the sort of the cash flow games. What were some of
Mhm.
these?
But
Not
that's the
very.
name of the game. It's called Cashflow Game.
Oh, is it? Okay. I
It's
haven't
a
heard of
like
it.
a board game where your goal is to get out of the rat race.
Okay. Interesting. Um, and just going back because it's so interesting and like it's a very rare upbringing to me anyway. Like it's so interesting that with the Ukraine, do you think that they really value this sort of like this digital education more so than other countries? Could you tell us a bit more about that? Because I don't think I'm aware of the same thing, for example,
Mhm.
like in the UK.
Okay,
But these like
that is an
you
interesting
talked about
question.
you talked about the Olympia
Yeah,
programs and these things and all these competitions. Like it's such a
yeah.
competitive mindset to teach a kid. It's so interesting.
Well, it's not majority that participate in that. So usually, everybody has an opportunity to enter an Olympiad. Like especially if they're doing well in the class, they would usually be offered, "Hey, don't you want to participate in some competition?" And then at first people do want to participate in competition who are offered that option, and then they decide for themselves is like this is something they like or not, or something that they see themselves doing for a long time, and actually going up the ranks, so to speak, by training and so on. Because I can tell you what it, well, it has also advantages, which are, I love the advantages of being in that space. I'll tell you. So in school, there were subjects that were boring for me. Obviously, everybody has
Yeah.
them. And there were subjects that were interesting. So being in these competitions allowed me to go to another school, another camp for training every week. And I would do this to skip the boring classes. And it was like a very good excuse that was authorized by the school, etc. So it sort of also connected together with freedom. It's like if you're willing to go an extra mile to train yourself and spend, let's say, every week 20 hours participating in training competitions and listen to lectures at the camp or at another school or at university, on your own time, but also sometimes you can skip some classes to do that. That gives you that's more commitment, like you have to work harder, you have to put more hours, but it also gives you more freedom. As I say, I had more control of my time, so I could spend time on things I actually am interested in developing and not spend time on things that I'm not.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting kind of advantage for myself as an individual. It made it easier to express myself in the way that I want. And the cost of that was that I had to put more effort into it.
Interesting.
That was my personal view. And now the view of the education system.
Yeah.
So I think when that was my time, when I was through education system, this was part of the system, but it was still like it wasn't like everybody was participating in that. But there were always teachers and lecturers, professors who were responsible for having a team and training them. At least one in every faculty for each discipline. So, for example, I was in university in physics faculty, and we had one trainer for programming competitions. He was also a professor of algorithmics and artificial intelligence classes as well. And mathematics faculty, the same university also had such a trainer. He was mathematics professor.
That's really interesting. I mean, like, so I comment that because obviously you have these programs in certain universities in the UK and things like this. But when you're talking about literally like being a kid and being in school and then also being in high school and still having access to these, like we had an ICT lab and things like this,
Mm-hmm.
but we never had leadership figures or tutors that really broke down that sort of education for us and made us understand like the importance of tech and obviously you brought that into your life and made it what you are today, right? um, that's really interesting and talking about these biggest like the biggest lessons you've learned, you mentioned a few there and you're talking about launching products as well. What did you learn about launching these products? Is there any sort of lessons that you haven't mentioned?
Let's reiterate again. So one lesson is try to not spend your money if you can help, unless you have very good cash flow that you can afford it. So use other people's money. So it's OPM. But a couple of other concepts that I've learned later, and I realized I could have applied when I was building my products and should have applied. Not only other people's money, but also other people's time. So don't do everything yourself. Work with people, build a team. Especially if you have the other people's money, you can build a team, and you should, because there's high chance to be successful, and it's almost like a responsibility to people that you got money from to do that, to build a good team. And there's a final concept which is also came a bit later when I understood is other people's customers. So you don't always need to acquire all your customers yourself. You can borrow customers from other companies that are several steps ahead of you and are somehow in a similar domain but not in competition with you.
Understood. That makes sense, because like a lot of really successful startups, especially in the Berlin space as well, like they get in between flows of cash, right? So they sort of, I guess they could be called like disruptors of certain fields, but yeah, that's interesting, and it relates to that.
I mean, that's what we did at Ride for whole of 2020, 2021, 2022. We basically started our best marketing channels for a very long time were partnerships. So getting existing customers and audiences of other relevant companies or even individuals and influencers and so on. So that was our approach for some time until it was working for some significant amount of time, and then once we started expanding into other parts of the market, of course that stopped working there, so we needed to switch gears, but it was a really good starting point.
Nice. And thanks so much for going into that detail, into your experience. It's really interesting learning about how your sort of mindset evolved when venturing into, founding a company and then joining another company. And yeah, it's really interesting hearing those experiences that shaped, your perspective and some of the milestones that really led you to where you are at the moment. One thing I just wanted to focus on in this sort of last closing segment as well was that sort of community engagement you touched on with the Kotlin Meet a User group that you started, and also your Tuesday club that I don't think we've touched on yet. Could you tell us a little bit about these and sort of how that sort of engagement in those communities sort of helps the professional growth that we're touching on?
Yes, I can definitely explain that. So back then in 2014 and 15, as I started blogging, I also started getting into some of public speaking. At least I wanted to try myself out in that. Because that forced me, of course, if you want to explain something in a blog or you want to give a presentation, you need to explain things better, and to explain things better, you need to understand them better. So that forced me, of course, to go deep on certain topics and actions and how they work, not only how to use them, because that was the only way I can explain them well. So that included, of course, test-driven development and software design, all these concepts to make software better.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with that concept, because by digging deeper, I started seeing opportunities, but also seeing problems like that are unaddressed or are poorly addressed, or they are well known, but nobody is actually putting effort to address them. So therefore, I do want, in the long term, my long-term goal is to improve the whole industry, software development industry, by leaps and bounds, how we do things and how we approach the problem solving and the business problems. And this is why I got involved with the community. So for example, one of the communities that I got involved quite early with in 2016 was called Software Crafting Community in Berlin, or in German, Southwest Kammer. And in that community, one of the first meetings that I attended was called Code Retreat. And that one was quite amazing because it's a one-day Saturday session. So Saturday, because you're supposed to spend your own time on this, not your employer time. So it like sets the tone that you're investing in yourself, not your employer investing in you. And second, I think, is that you have to code the same problem 6 times throughout the day. And between sessions, you have to delete all your code. There is another learning there that the code isn't actually the most important artifact of software development activity. What is in here, what you learned from engaging with that code and with that problem is actually what is the most important artifact. And then, of course, when you get to the terms with that, it's very hard to delete your code, right? It's like you're deleting your baby. You just worked on it and you're like, it's gone. It's painful. But once you get to the terms with that and it stops being painful, you realize, oh, actually, every time I write it, it gets better. And I get to explore more interesting ideas, and so on. And also the framework of this day makes sure that every session has different restriction. So you're guided to explore different ideas, the ones that you couldn't explore before because you already have some solution in mind. But because there is a restriction, you can't choose that anymore. So you have to find a different solution. So it's like a mechanism to widen your toolbox of what you can do.
Yeah, amazing.
And I was very, very involved in that community for years, and I still am involved very heavily. And then when I started writing my Kotlin ebook, I was one of the first people who jumped on a Kotlin train when it became like acceptable from Google community. And I wanted to write about this because I felt like it was an amazing programming language, and it was very powerful, and it like borrowed a lot of good concepts from other languages and didn't borrow bad concepts. So I was like, this is perfect, this is amazing. So I wanted to promote it, and I used it to train my blogging skills, my online business skills, and I also got involved in Kotlin Meetup, obviously, because I wanted to talk about it and give presentations. And then, so it was kind of, very selfish reasons from one perspective, but from another perspective, my goal is always to share as much as possible, to share my learnings, to expand, to get all people involved at the next level as much as I can, as much as they can. And then, as you know, I'm a fan of extreme programming, and I'm always trying to implement it well, but also try to take it to the next level, try to adapt it to a particular company or environment in such a way that it's not just, by the book, but actually is implemented in a way that it works extremely well. And this is where I've heard about this meetup that was started by Yvette in Berlin. It was an Extreme Tuesday Club. I was like, oh, is it related to extreme programming? And I read the description, it is. So I joined the first session, and then I joined almost every session after that. And then eventually Yvette had to move to a different city in Germany. And the meetup became often, so I and my other friend decided to take it over. And now we're running it every month, this meetup. And it is an amazing meetup because essentially it is about software, but also about related concepts to software and work, like product and HR and management and leadership. Anything can go there. And essentially it's a meetup where there's no speaker. Well, there is presenter, but it's not speaker.
Yeah.
So there's a topic that we want to discuss. There is a presenter. Presenter's job is to give introduction to the quick 5 to 10 minutes introduction to the topic. And then group discussion starts. So everybody splits into groups, discusses, and then they come back and share the learnings. And then the magic happens is the final step of the event is to choose the topic for the next time. So everybody proposes a topic, and whoever proposes the topic has to become a presenter if their topic gets chosen by the group. So it's like very interesting. Like I don't have to look for presenters.
That's nice. You have to get elected, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It just works on its own. You just have to facilitate it. You choose a topic, and you will be surprised what kind of topics people bring up. It starts with extreme programming, but then it goes into all territories of the business, of personal life, and so on. For example, the last one that I just had yesterday was how to onboard new joiners. I mean, it's an important topic. It's what we do every time we hire somebody, right?
Yeah.
Or somebody gets hired as well. They are part of the process.
That's super cool. I like that. And how can people get involved in the Tuesday Club then, if they want to, if they're hearing this? And they're in Berlin.
Well, I mean, they just hear usually by relation from, if I know somebody and I think, oh, they should come, I will recommend them. And that the same happens between the different members. The members recommend that meetup to others because they love it and they think, oh, you would be also interested in this. You should come with me. And then we have like a core group that come almost every time or very frequently. And then there are, people who come and go, right? So and that core group over time is sort of slowly expanding.
Nice. And I like the example you mentioned with the code retreat as well. And one of the important things you said was it's more like mentally what the code isn't the most important artifact, and it's more about the mentality and what you learn. It sort of reminded me of what you were saying when you were talking about sort of disabling that internal what was it, compiler in your brain when you're speaking to other people and understanding others' code and things. That sort of brings me into some of the closing questions as well when we talk about this mentality. And I know that you have an interesting one as well. Like, do you have a morning routine that maximizes sort of productivity and the success?
Of course I do. Of course I do. When I follow it, right? So I follow it from time to time. I can tell you. So it's not very consistent. I'm not a robot. So my consistency would be like I follow my routine for 3 to 6 months consistently. Then I have something happens in my life, some kind of critical project, whatever, that breaks down this routine for next couple months, and then I get back to it and I can use it again for next 3 to 6 months. That has been my cycle so far.
Yeah.
The way that the routine looks like is that I choose to wake up at a very particular time, let's say at 5 or 6 a.m. And it depends. Sometimes very often I want to wake up at 5, but sometimes if I had a meetup, for example, that where we finished at 0 o'clock, I'm not gonna even try to wake up at 5 or move it to 6, right? But then the routine itself is a very simple routine. It's a 20-minute exercise, 20-minute planning my day usually on paper. It feels the best because it puts by doing it instead of in a computer, doing it on paper, it gives this plan for the day even higher level of importance in my brain.
Okay, like a mind-muscle connection, sort of.
Yeah, sort of, because active writing is more important than active typing, because it's more physical, and then also every time you check the item of the list, it feels good. Feels better than clicking on a checkbox. And then also I practice mindfulness meditation for 15 minutes as well. And then for 5 minutes, I write my long-term goals. And what I apply is a technique called 10x goal setting. That's where every goal that I write, if my initial thought process, I want to be like a CEO and founder of a company, of a profitable company with 500 employees. Let's say that this is a goal. 10x goal setting say, 500 is what you're comfortable with, what you think you can achieve. Make it 10x that. And don't ask any questions how you're going to do that. Just write it and then write the next one. So that gives a lot of motivation and energy in the morning, and builds momentum when I do that, whenever I write these goals. So that is my morning routine. It usually takes 1 hour. I do also eat, but I usually eat something very quick in the morning because I don't want to waste time on this. And then I do 1 or 2 hours of deep work, depending on how much time I have available before, for example, I need to go to the office for my job. Yeah. And that deep work I use for different purposes. For example, I can use it to write my book, or if there is a critical project at my job, I would use it to finish some task for my job, and so on. So I use that flexibly. I schedule that time. I use it as a resource, and then I, do my work, and then I come back home and I learn, relax, and go to sleep.
That's my day. Yeah, and when you were talking about the goal setting and these things, I imagine that really breaks down what you were talking about earlier, where it breaks down the barrier, where the fear of success and fear of failure, because it makes that real, and it creates that journey that you could follow. And if people want to check out Alex's website, it's 10xsoftwareengineering.com, right? I think the last blog you wrote about was about that sort of how you structure your day. And how you break it down. So that's interesting. Did I get the website right? Is that correct?
Yes. And there's also a short version of that, which is 10xswe.com.
Nice one. And then just going into some sort of final questions. You mentioned that you and your wife got together like a young age, I think. And
Yeah.
what's your best advice on balancing the sort of family and work?
I have an unpopular opinion here. I don't believe in balance of work and life. So I think about this as just life. So my work is part of my life. My family is part of my life.
Yeah.
When I have kids, that will be part of my life. My hobbies will be part of my life. So everything is life. So there is no need to balance. What is there need to is to advance on all these fronts to my goals. So I basically try to set goals for all of these. So when I do my 10x goal setting, I set all of these goals. I have my family goal, for example, and then when I think about what needs to be done for it, I do it. So I don't say, oh, I need to do a lot of work and I will sacrifice my family. No, I'm saying, I need to do a lot of work here and I need to do a lot of work with my family and I will do it. I will do my best to do it.
Interesting. I don't think that would be about an unpopular opinion, to be fair. The way you explained it made a lot of sense.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear. That means we're communicating if it is making a lot of sense.
And
this is a problem. This is a problem that why I want to improve software engineering, because this is a huge problem in our industry, is that a lot of things that we do, when you really think about it, are not common sense. And there's other way to do it, which is common sense, but nobody's doing it.
Yeah. So it almost feels like you're the outlier when really
you're not supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be that way, but it actually isn't, because of a variety of reasons, variety of factors that affect people's lives and people's professions.
And when we talk about that, sort of like new mindsets and like literally like new trends and what you see of the actual future, because I think the new generation like is breaking down those barriers that you just mentioned. What do you see from that new generation of hires and engineers? Like, would you have any advice as well?
Yes, so there are some challenges, at least for my generation. There are already challenges I observe, and other in my network are observing with newer generation of developers, at least, and other types of professionals. One of the challenges is it's harder to motivate them because if previously you could say, you could discuss with them what's their personal goal, and you could always easily tie that back into their profession, because that goal is probably will be a professional goal, most likely. So you're able to do some goal setting together with your report and help them and support them to get to that point. And they will be, because of this, will be high performance team member, and it's like a win-win for both sides. Person achieves their goal and gets support, and the company gets the better results. Now it sometimes starts to get difficult because the goals of the people will be not professional. So it becomes very hard to tie that back in. I don't have a solution yet. I have some ideas. I have an ideas how a non-professional goal can be broken down to a set of skills that you can acquire if you set professional goal and try to achieve it, and then you can use the skills to achieve your personal goal. So that's something that I'm playing with, but it's very challenging.
That sort of relates to the work-life balance that you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
And when we talk about knowledge as well, like what are your top 3 or top sort of book recommendations for tech knowledge?
Yes, so I have my top 3 best books that I would want every engineer to read out there, of course. The first one is called The Pragmatic Programmer by Andy Hunt. The second one is Extreme Programming Explained by Ken Beck. And the third one is Refactoring, second edition, of course, because it's up to date, by Martin Fowler. Obviously, I do have a much larger list that I recommend, but it's not top 3. It's going to be top 60.
Awesome. And on a more personal level, what's your favorite drink in Berlin? What's your favorite thing to drink?
This will be a very, very fine question. My favorite drink is tomato juice.
Okay.
Do you know why? Do you want to know why? Because I don't drink alcohol because some health issues. So I stopped drinking like 11 years ago. However, obviously, I want to be social and socialize and so on. And that if I go somewhere with people to the bar, my door or something. Oh, the ordering tomato juice sparks interesting, nice conversations, because you can joke you can joke first that it's actually what's the
Bloody Mary?
Bloody Mary, yeah. You can joke about that, but then you can say, oh well, actually I don't drink alcohol, that's why it's tomato juice, and it's an interesting conversation starter, and you can go from there and move to other topics. That's. But also I do like tomato juice. I like its taste.
Nice. I can't get behind Bloody Marys. It's a very, very intense drink. But I imagine you very much enjoy them. But what about food? What's your favorite food to eat in Berlin?
Food is interesting one. Here I don't have an answer because I don't have any favorite food at the moment, because in my current stage in life, I am very focused on advancing on work and family and other topics. So I don't think so much about food. For me, food is like a distraction. So I just make sure that I have it and make sure it's nutritious, like that I have everything I need to be healthy, and that's it. So for me, basically, food is a very pragmatic topic. It's an important factor to my performance in all of the sectors of my life.
Yeah.
So, but also I want to be very efficient with it. Therefore, for example, in the morning I would drink something like Huel. It's just a mix with all the nutrition that you need. And then in the afternoon we have lunches here in the office because we have a chef. So I don't have to think about this. This is great. Like whenever I don't have to think about what I need to eat, this is amazing for me.
An office chef, that must be nice. Yeah, I kind of assumed you might have an answer like that when you mentioned that your morning routine, and you said you sometimes have breakfast because you feel like it's a waste of time.
Yeah. So it's not just waste of time; it's also waste of mental capacity, because I not only think about not wasting time, I also not think about wasting my decision willpower. Because I can literally tell that by the end of the day, I'm losing this. So I'm like running out of decisions I can make, well-made decisions per day. So therefore, if I don't have to make a decision, I shouldn't, because that will allow me to make an important decision a bit later in the day.
That does make sense. And I always find I used to have really big lunches, for example, and then you sit down and you're like, my brain is just not firing at all. I don't think I could even read a few lines of a script or anything. So yeah, I see where you're coming from there. And then my final question, just from a personal perspective, what's your favorite country to visit and why?
That would be my aspiration to have a country to visit that I like to visit, because right now I don't have any. And the reason, because somehow, I did travel significantly, because I also travel for vacations, but I also travel for giving talks and presentations and conferences and stuff. Even vacation travel wasn't because I wanted a vacation, but because I did it for my family. Right. So for me, it was almost like a job, and for me, travel is in general stressful. So I feel like I will get a bit later in my life to the point where I am able to enjoy my vacation time, and I will have a country that I like to visit. But right now, I don't.
That makes sense, and it's perhaps a valid answer. Like you said, there's so much to focus on right now, and then so many challenges at Ride Capital, and so many things that you want to do as yourself as an entrepreneur. Maybe when you have that financial freedom in the future, you'll have access to these ones.
Yes, and that reminds me also, the way I think about this is that whatever vacation I do now is not a real vacation. So actually, I do want a vacation, but I want what I consider a real vacation. For me, a real vacation would mean like taking months off and go somewhere really great place in real good circumstances and just spend a ton of money, right? And just have everything you need. So that's what I think is vacation. That is actually what would recover me and make me feel good. The itsy bitsy vacations, they only create stress, and also once they're finished, I have to return and have backlog of things I need to catch up on, it doesn't allow me to recover.
Yeah. Essentially, it can be taxing as well from like a mental capacity, right? Like if you're doing something you're not necessarily interested in, it can take away like the sort of mental energy. And then finally, Alex, just any feedback you had on this podcast would be great from my perspective in terms of learnings and me sort of moving forward.
Well, I mean, one feedback for me is that I can talk too much about my story. It's a very long story, so it takes some time. So unfortunately, it took a little bit more time than we expected. And for the podcast, I felt like it was a good structure. And also I thank you for giving me some of that structure, some of the plan, like the map in advance, because that also allowed me to prepare a little bit. And for example, the question about the top 3 books, I actually had to think, and the question about like what did I learn at Write, I also had to think and prepare. So thank you for that. That was really good.
Nice one. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Alex, and it's so interesting, especially when you're talking about your sort of journey and the evolution of your mindset, and your childhood and how you sort of grown into that mindset, and what your core values are, and everything you've learned. And thank you very much for sharing that with us. I really appreciate you having you on the podcast.
Thank you, Gus.
Thanks for joining us today for my 5th episode of Source Talks, the Tech Lab. I'd really like to thank Alex for joining me. It's been really intriguing to learn about his journey so far, and the values that he's learned and picked up, and some of the lessons that he wants to teach the next generation, and learning about Ride Capital itself. You can check out his website. That's, again, we mentioned it in the podcast, but that's 10xsoftwareengineering.com, where you can read his blog, and you can also purchase a copy of his book and learn all about him. Tune in next time for more insights and discussions with engineering leaders. And you can listen on all sort of major streaming platforms. You can find us on LinkedIn at Source Technology, at www.source-technology.com. If you're interested in joining our community and sharing your insights and stories from different business contexts, or generally being involved, we'd love to hear from you. So please reach out to me or one of my colleagues. We'll book a call, and it'd be great to have you join the growing community. We can't wait to share more conversations like this with you, so you can take yourself to the next level. Thank you very much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Bye-bye.